In The Empire Strikes Back, there's this moment where Palpatine strictly warns Vader that the son of Anakin Skywalker must never become a Jedi. Ever. And you might think it's because Luke destroyed the Death Star or because he's Vader's son. But that's not it. The truth is buried deep in the Return of the Jedi novelization and the Dark Empire comics, and when you understand what was really happening to Palpatine's body during this time, everything clicks into place. The Emperor was literally dying, and Luke was the one thing that could accelerate his death. See, most people think Palpatine avoided fighting Luke in Return of the Jedi because he was arrogant, like he didn't need to get his hands dirty. Or maybe because he wanted to turn Luke to the dark side instead of killing him. And sure, that's part of it. But there's something way more sinister going on here. Something the movies don't show you, but the books spell out clearly. Palpatine was rotting from the inside out. The dark side was literally consuming his body. Every time he used his power, every burst of Force lightning, every manipulation of the Force, it was burning through him like acid. His flesh was decaying. His bones were weakening. The dark side doesn't age you like time does. It hollows you out. It eats you from the inside until there's nothing left but a husk held together by pure willpower and hatred. By the time of Return of the Jedi, Palpatine's body was so fragile that one uncontrolled surge of power could rip him apart completely. And here's the thing. Luke Skywalker represented chaos. Pure, unpredictable chaos. He wasn't like Anakin, who Palpatine had groomed and manipulated for over a decade. Luke was born outside of Palpatine's control. He was trained by Obi-Wan and Yoda, the two Jedi who had been thorns in Palpatine's side for decades. Luke was everything the Emperor couldn't predict, couldn't manipulate, couldn't control. And that terrified him more than anything else in the galaxy. Let's go back to the beginning. When Palpatine first heard the name Luke Skywalker, he thought it was just a coincidence, some random pilot in the rebellion. But then he felt it. That signature in the Force, bright, powerful, defiant, a Skywalker. And for the first time in decades, the Emperor hesitated. He remembered Anakin, the chosen one, the boy he had molded since childhood. Anakin had been predictable, ambitious, arrogant, ruled by passion and fear. Palpatine could manipulate him because Anakin needed to be understood. He needed validation. But Luke was different. He was raised by farmers on a desert planet. He had friends. He believed in hope and compassion. He wasn't corrupted by power or politics. He was pure potential shaped by the light side of the Force. And that scared the hell out of Palpatine. In the Return of the Jedi novelization, there's this moment when Vader tells Palpatine that Luke is with the rebels on Endor. And the book, straight up, tells us that Palpatine was frightened, his brow furrowed, his voice stayed cool, but inside he was panicking. Because he couldn't sense Luke. Only Vader could, through their father-son bond. And that meant Luke was already more powerful than Palpatine had anticipated. Vader noticed this fear, and he enjoyed it. The book describes how Vader looked at his son with pride, because Luke had inspired genuine terror in his master. For years, Vader had been a slave to Palpatine. His suit was specifically designed to be weak against Force lightning so the Emperor could control him. But now, with Luke in the picture, Vader saw an opportunity, a chance to finally overthrow the Emperor and rule the galaxy with his son by his side. But Palpatine knew this too. He knew Vader's ultimate plan was to betray him. That's how the Sith work. The apprentice always tries to kill the master. But with Luke in the equation, Vader became far more dangerous, because now he had someone powerful enough to help him do it. So why didn't Palpatine just kill Luke? Why go through all the trouble of trying to turn him to the dark side? Because of the rule of two. For 1,000 years, the Sith followed this philosophy. One master, one apprentice. The master holds the power, and the apprentice craves it. When the apprentice becomes strong enough to kill the master, they take their place and find a new apprentice. It's a cycle of betrayal and survival that makes the Sith stronger with each generation. But Palpatine didn't just follow the rule of two. He perfected it. He didn't conquer through armies or brute force. He conquered through infection, through corruption. He turned entire systems against themselves. He made people enslave themselves and call it order. Violence was for the impatient. True dominance came from control. That's why he built the empire the way he did. Not as a collection of warlords, but as a pyramid of dependence. Every admiral, every governor, every inquisitor, even Vader, they were all just puppets dancing to the rhythm of Palpatine's mind. To unleash raw power was wasteful. To strike directly was to abandon mastery for chaos. So when Luke came along, Palpatine couldn't just kill him. That would be the act of a barbarian, not a master. He wanted Luke to fall on his own, to validate the Sith philosophy one more time, to prove that everyone, even the purest soul in the galaxy, could be corrupted. But beneath all that calculation, Palpatine knew the truth. He couldn't afford a direct confrontation. His body was failing. One unrestrained moment, one uncontrolled burst of power, and he could burn himself alive from the inside out. The Dark Empire comics reveal something crucial here. By the time of Return of the Jedi, Palpatine had spent years channeling massive amounts of dark side energy. He was no longer just a Sith Lord. He had become a living conduit for the dark side itself, and that power was tearing him apart. His blood thickened. His heart struggled. His muscles ached not from exertion but from resistance. The Force wasn't flowing through him anymore. It was puppeteering him like a corpse, animated by sheer willpower. Every movement was an act of command. Every breath was a struggle. His body was no longer his own. It was a dying vessel kept alive by the dark side's refusal to let him rest. He had become a living paradox, power so absolute that it destroyed its master. Now, you might be wondering, if Palpatine was so weak, how was he still the most powerful being in the galaxy? Because he wasn't weak. He had too much power. That was the problem. Imagine holding a star in your hands. You're not dying because you're frail. You're dying because the energy is so intense, it's melting you from the inside. That's what the dark side was doing to Palpatine. He was a storm trapped in a flesh cage, desperate to break free. And Luke Skywalker was the key that could unlock that storm prematurely. See, Luke wasn't just powerful. He was unpredictable. He was connected to the living force in a way that Palpatine couldn't control. If they fought, if Palpatine unleashed his full power against him, the chaos of the Force might consume him completely. His body might disintegrate before he could transfer his spirit into a new clone. Oh yeah, that's right. Palpatine had been preparing for his death this entire time. On the hidden world of Bice, deep in the core of the galaxy, Palpatine had built his secret empire. Massive cloning vats lined the walls, rows of half-formed bodies suspended in green light. Scientists and Sith acolytes worked day and night, mixing science with dark-side sorcery, creating vessels for his soul. He had learned to send his consciousness beyond his body, into the void between life and death, and pull himself back again. He was practicing immortality. But the process wasn't perfect. If he died violently, if his body was destroyed before he was ready, his spirit might be lost in the chaos, scattered across the Force, never to return. That's why he needed Luke to fall to the dark side first. If Luke became his apprentice, Palpatine could eliminate Vader safely and transition into a new clone body with a more powerful servant at his side. Everything would go according to plan. But Luke refused to play along. During the final confrontation on the Death Star, Palpatine thought he had won. He watched Luke fight Vader with rage and brutality, giving in to his anger, tapping into the dark side. For a moment, it seemed like the last Jedi would become a Sith. But then Luke stopped. He threw away his lightsaber. He looked at the Emperor and said, "I am a Jedi, like my father before me." And in that moment, Palpatine realized his worst fear had come true. Luke wasn't going to turn. He wasn't going to be controlled. He was everything Anakin should have been, but never was. He was what Palpatine could never create. So the Emperor did what he always feared he'd have to do. He unleashed his full power. Force. Lightning poured out of him like a flood. It ripped through Luke's body, tearing him apart cell by cell, and Palpatine reveled in it. But then Vader moved. The father, watching his son die, made a choice. He grabbed the Emperor and lifted him over his head. And in that moment, the storm finally broke free. The lightning turned inward. Palpatine's body ignited. The dark side energy that had been trapped inside him for decades erupted all at once. His flesh burned away. His bones cracked. His scream echoed through the Force. But here's the thing. Palpatine didn't die in that moment. Not really. His spirit tore free from his body and shot across the galaxy, straight to Biss, where a new clone body was waiting. The cage was broken. The burden was lifted. And for the first time in years, Palpatine was free. So why was Palpatine terrified of Luke Skywalker? Because Luke represented everything he couldn't control. He was born outside the Emperor's influence. He was trained by Palpatine's greatest enemies. He had the power of a Skywalker, but the heart of a Jedi. He was unpredictable, compassionate, and willing to sacrifice everything for what he believed in. Palpatine had spent his entire life mastering control. He manipulated governments, armies, entire civilizations. But he couldn't manipulate the living Force, and Luke was the living Force personified. Every time Palpatine reached out with his senses, he felt Luke's presence like a blade cutting through the darkness, a current of harmony that defied everything the Sith stood for. And deep down, Palpatine knew that if he faced Luke directly, if he unleashed the full storm of his power against someone so connected to the light, the Force itself might reject him. His body might shatter before his plan was complete. That's why he avoided the duel. That's why he manipulated from the shadows. That's why he tried to turn Luke instead of killing him. Because fighting Luke Skywalker wasn't just dangerous, it was unpredictable. And for someone who had spent decades orchestrating every detail of his empire, unpredictability was the ultimate threat. In the end, Vader proved that Palpatine was right to be afraid, because it wasn't Luke's power that destroyed the Emperor. It was his love for his father, something no Sith could ever account for, something Palpatine, in all his dark wisdom, never saw coming. Luke Skywalker didn't defeat Palpatine with a lightsaber or the Force. He defeated him by being everything the dark side wasn't: compassion, hope, selflessness. And that's what made him the most dangerous person in the galaxy.